If someone rushes home every single night without ever asking for recognition, don't question what they're hiding. Ask who they're trying to protect. For 3 years, Hannah Brooks had never been late. Not once. Every morning before dawn, she arrived at Blackstone Castle carrying nothing more than a small linen satchel and a quiet smile. She scrubbed marble floors until they reflected the morning light, polished silver trays until they gleamed like mirrors, and carried steaming meals through endless stone corridors without drawing attention to herself. She was the kind of maid people quickly forgot. Reliable, gentle, invisible. That was exactly how Hannah wanted it. She never complained. She never argued. She never accepted praise longer than a simple thank you. When the castle hosted lavish banquets, other servants eagerly volunteered for extra shifts because the nobles often rewarded them with generous tips. Hannah always declined. Not because she disliked the work, because she had somewhere else she needed to be. Every evening, precisely as the castle bells announced sunset, she folded her worn apron, washed her hands, collected a small bundle from the kitchen, and quietly left through the western gate. Always carrying bread, sometimes soup, occasionally medicine wrapped carefully inside cloth. Never empty-handed. The other servants had stopped asking questions long ago. Some believed she secretly met a lover. Others whispered she was hiding debts. One cook insisted she belonged to another pack and worked as a spy. Hannah simply smiled whenever the rumors reached her ears. She never defended herself. Some truths mattered too much to explain. From the highest balcony overlooking the castle courtyard, Alpha King Ethan Blackwood watched another sunset paint the sky with shades of amber and crimson. His attention wasn't on the guards changing shifts, nor on the nobles leaving the council chamber. It rested on one young maid walking briskly toward the western gate. Again, beside him, his trusted beta, Marcus Hale, noticed the king's unusual silence. "You've been watching her for weeks." Ethan answered without taking his eyes off Hannah. 3 months. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You counted. I noticed patterns." The beta followed Hannah with his gaze. "She's only a maid." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Exactly. Then why does she leave at the exact same minute every single evening?" Marcus chuckled. "Maybe she's simply punctual." "No." Ethan's voice remained calm. "People are late. They oversleep. They linger. They change. She never does." Far below, Hannah paused beside the castle bakery. The elderly baker quietly handed her a paper-wrapped loaf. She offered several copper coins. The old man gently pushed her hand away. "Not today. You've already paid enough this week." Hannah insisted. "I can't keep accepting your kindness. You've earned it." He smiled warmly before placing the bread into her basket anyway. Hannah lowered her head gratefully. "Thank you." She hurried away before he could notice the tears gathering in her eyes. Ethan had seen enough. Small details rarely lied. A maid who refused bonuses but counted every copper coin. A woman who accepted stale bread for herself while carefully protecting a small bottle of medicine inside her basket. Someone who lived as though every single coin already belonged to another person. The castle gates slowly closed behind her. Marcus folded his arms. "You think she's stealing?" Ethan looked toward the forest stretching beyond the western road. "If she were stealing, she wouldn't be buying bread." Marcus frowned. "Then what do you think she's hiding?" For the first time that evening, Ethan allowed himself to voice the question that had quietly followed him for weeks. "I don't think she's hiding something." He watched Hannah disappear beneath the towering pine trees beyond the last cottages. "I think she's carrying someone else's entire world home every night." The words lingered between them. Marcus remained unconvinced, but Ethan trusted the instinct that had protected both his kingdom and his people through countless dangers. Experience had taught him that extraordinary stories rarely announce themselves with dramatic beginnings. More often, they began with one ordinary person making the same quiet sacrifice every single day. As darkness settled across Blackstone Castle, Ethan made a decision that surprised even himself. Tomorrow night, he would leave without royal guards, without his crown, without anyone knowing. For the first time since becoming Alpha King, he would secretly follow a humble maid into the forest, believing he was about to uncover a simple answer. Instead, he was about to discover a truth that would change not only one woman's life, but his own forever. Sometimes the smallest house carries the heaviest secret, and sometimes the strongest king is the last person to discover it. The following evening, Ethan Blackwood left Blackstone Castle alone. No royal armor, no jeweled cloak, no escort. He wore a weathered hunter's coat, leather boots stained with dust, and a simple hood that concealed the face every citizen in the kingdom recognized. Only Rowan, his oldest general, knew where he was going. You shouldn't go alone. Rowan stood beside the stable, holding the reins of Ethan's horse. If she truly is hiding something dangerous, Ethan tightened the saddle strap. Then more guards will only frighten her. And if she's innocent? Ethan looked toward the western gate. Then she deserves to keep her dignity. The old general nodded without another word. As sunset approached, Hannah quietly finished wiping the last wooden table inside the servants' dining hall. She folded her apron exactly as she always did, collected the small basket waiting beneath the kitchen counter. Inside rested a loaf of bread, a flask of vegetable soup, fresh herbs, and a tiny paper package wrapped carefully in linen. Medicine. The elderly cook smiled kindly. I managed to save a little honey today. He slipped a small jar into her basket. It'll help with the cough. Hannah's eyes softened. You've already helped enough. The cook shook his head. Go. Someone's waiting for you. She whispered her thanks before hurrying away. From the shadow beneath an ancient oak tree beyond the castle wall, Ethan watched every movement. She wasn't meeting anyone. She wasn't looking over her shoulder. She simply walked with quiet determination, never slowing her pace. The western road gradually disappeared beneath towering pines. The sounds of the castle faded behind them. Birdsong replaced the distant ringing of evening bells. Hannah continued another mile before leaving the main road entirely. She followed a narrow path hidden beneath wildflowers and thick undergrowth. Ethan carefully stayed behind, keeping enough distance that even an experienced hunter would struggle to notice him. The deeper they entered the forest, the more questions filled his mind. Why would anyone travel this far every single night? Nearly 30 minutes later, Hannah reached a small clearing. At its center stood an old wooden cottage. Its roof sagged slightly with age. Smoke curled gently from a crooked chimney. Several flower boxes rested beneath the windows despite the weathered walls. Someone cared deeply for this place. Before Hannah even reached the front steps, the door burst open. A little girl with golden curls and bright blue eyes ran barefoot across the grass. Mama! Her joyful voice echoed through the quiet forest. Hannah immediately knelt. The basket slipped gently onto the ground as she opened both arms. The child threw herself against her with complete trust. I missed you. I missed you more. Hannah kissed the top of her daughter's head again and again. Were you good for Mrs. Eleanor today? The little girl nodded enthusiastically. I finished my reading, and I practiced writing my letters. I'm so proud of you. Hidden among the trees, Ethan felt something inside his chest tighten. This wasn't what he expected. Not secret meetings. Not betrayal. Not espionage. Only a mother coming home. The elderly neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor, stepped out carrying a basket of washed clothes. You made it just before dark. I always do. Mrs. Eleanor noticed Hannah's tired face. You look exhausted. Hannah smiled gently. It was a busy day. The older woman lowered her voice. She had another fever this afternoon. The smile disappeared from Hannah's face. How high? Not as bad as last week. But she asked for you every hour. Without another word, Hannah lifted the little girl into her arms and hurried inside the cottage. Ethan quietly moved closer to one of the windows. A single candle illuminated the tiny room. There was only one bed, one table, 2 wooden chairs. Everything inside had been repaired countless times instead of replaced. Hannah poured the soup into a small bowl. She added the honey before handing it to her daughter. You eat first. The little girl frowned. Aren't you hungry? I already ate at the castle. It was a lie. Ethan had watched her all afternoon. She hadn't eaten a single bite. The child looked unconvinced. Promise. I promise. Satisfied, the little girl began eating. Only after watching her daughter finish every spoonful did Hannah quietly tear a small piece from the stale end of the bread. That became her dinner. Nothing more. Ethan slowly lowered his eyes. The woman every servant believed was cold and distant had simply been giving every piece of herself to someone waiting beyond the forest. And as the little girl rested her head against Hannah's shoulder, smiling peacefully despite the lingering cough, Ethan realized the greatest secret in Blackstone Kingdom had never been hidden inside the castle walls. It had been living quietly inside a forgotten cottage, protected by a maid who carried an entire world home in a worn wicker basket every single evening. A person's greatest sacrifice is often hidden inside the lie they tell every day. I'm not hungry. Ethan remained outside the cottage long after the candlelight dimmed. Through the narrow window, he watched Hannah gently brush Lily's golden hair before helping the little girl into bed. Every movement carried remarkable tenderness, yet unmistakable exhaustion. Hannah tucked the worn blanket beneath Lily's shoulders, kissed her forehead, then rested her hand against the child's cheek. Still warm. The fever had not disappeared. Will I be strong enough to come with you someday? Lily whispered sleepily. Hannah forced a cheerful smile. Of course you will. When? Soon. When the flowers bloom again. Lily smiled, accepting the answer without question. You always say that. And one day it'll be true. Within minutes, the little girl drifted asleep. Only then did Hannah allow her own smile to fade. She quietly reached beneath the table and pulled out a small wooden box. Ethan leaned closer, careful not to make a sound. Inside the box were only a handful of silver coins. She counted them once, twice, 3 times, then opened another folded piece of paper. An invoice from the royal healers. Medicine due within 5 days. Amount owed, nearly 3 months of her wages. Hannah closed her eyes. For a long moment she simply sat there, shoulders trembling silently. Not crying loudly, not complaining, just trying to gather enough strength to face tomorrow. After several deep breaths, she took off the simple silver pendant hanging around her neck. It was old, delicate, clearly the only valuable thing she still owned. She stared at it for several seconds before whispering to herself, I'm sorry, Mom. I have no choice. Ethan felt his chest tighten. That pendant wasn't jewelry. It was a memory, and tomorrow she intended to sell it. Just then, someone knocked gently on the cottage door. Mrs. Eleanor stepped inside, carrying a small basket. I baked too much bread again. Hannah smiled knowingly. You baked exactly enough. The older woman laughed softly. You've caught me. She placed the basket on the table before noticing the unpaid invoice. You still don't have enough? Hannah quietly shook her head. I'll manage. You always say that. I always do. Mrs. Eleanor hesitated. You could ask the castle. I won't. Why? Hannah looked toward Lily sleeping peacefully. Because if anyone learns she's here, they'll ask questions. They'll separate us. I can't risk that. Mrs. Eleanor sighed. No mother should carry this alone. Hannah answered with calm determination. I'm not alone. I have her. Outside the window, Ethan lowered his gaze. For years he had believed every servant within his kingdom lived under his protection. Tonight he realized one of them had been fighting an impossible battle completely alone while standing only a few corridors away from his throne every single day. As Hannah carefully folded the invoice and returned it to the wooden box, another object slipped onto the table. A faded wolf-shaped carving. Old, worn smooth from years of handling. Lily had fallen asleep clutching it earlier. Hannah gently picked it up, smiling through fresh tears. Your father made this. He would have known what to do. The words froze Ethan where he stood. Father? No husband had ever visited the cottage. No one in the castle had spoken of one. Questions multiplied inside his mind. Had the man died? Abandoned them? Or was there another story no one knew? Before Ethan could think further, a harsh cough echoed through the tiny room. Lily's body shook violently. Hannah rushed to her bedside, lifting the frightened child into her arms. It's all right. I'm here. The coughing worsened. The little girl's breathing became shallow. Hannah quickly measured a few precious drops of medicine into a spoon. Only a few remained in the bottle. She held Lily until the attack finally passed. When the child fell asleep again, Hannah looked at the nearly empty bottle. 1 day left. Maybe 2. Nothing in her face showed panic. Only determination. Tomorrow she would wake before dawn. Return to the castle. Smile as always. Work until her hands ached. And somehow find enough money to keep her daughter alive for 1 more week. Hidden beneath the darkness outside, Ethan finally understood the truth. Hannah Brooks had never been running away from Blackstone Castle. Every evening, she had been racing against time itself. True kindness is measured by what a person gives away when no one is watching. Ethan returned to Blackstone Castle just before sunrise. The forest path behind him disappeared beneath the morning mist, but the images from the cottage refused to leave his mind. Hannah's trembling hands counting silver coins. The nearly empty bottle of medicine. a little girl pretending not to notice her mother's empty plate. For the first time in many years, the Alpha King entered his private chamber carrying a burden no battlefield had ever placed upon him. Not guilt, responsibility. He had ruled Blackwood Kingdom for 7 years. Yet only one night outside the castle walls had shown him a hardship that existed within walking distance of his throne. As servants prepared breakfast, Ethan touched nothing on the table. Fresh bread, roasted meat, fruit, honey, everything Hannah's daughter could only dream about. The thought stole his appetite. A knock sounded at the chamber door. "Come in." Rowan entered quietly. "You were gone all night." "I was." The old general studied Ethan's face. "You found something." Ethan remained silent for several moments. Then he finally answered. "I found a mother trying to lose a battle with dignity." Rowan frowned. "What happened?" Ethan described everything. The cottage, Lily's illness, the medicine, the unpaid debt, the stale bread Hannah called dinner. When he finished speaking, even Rowan lowered his head. "I never imagined." "Neither did I." The room fell silent. Finally, Ethan stood. "I want to know everything. Not rumors. Facts." Rowan nodded immediately. "I'll begin today." "No." Ethan looked directly at him. "No soldiers. No public investigation. If Hannah learns she's being watched, she'll think she's done something wrong." "So how?" Ethan answered calmly. "Find the truth without disturbing her life." By midday, Rowan returned carrying only a thin leather folder. "There isn't much." Ethan opened it. Hannah Brooks, 27 years old. Employed at Blackstone Castle for 3 years. Excellent service record. No disciplinary actions. No living relatives officially recorded. No husband. No criminal history. No property besides the small cottage rented through St. Elian's Parish. One line caught Ethan's attention. Medical debt. Outstanding for nearly 4 years. The amount had grown with interest each season. Ethan slowly closed the folder. 4 years. She has carried this alone for 4 years. Later that afternoon, Ethan quietly visited the Royal Infirmary. The castle's chief healer, Amelia Carter, looked up in surprise. "Your Majesty, I need your help." He handed her the copied prescription Rowan had obtained from the village apothecary. Amelia's expression changed immediately. "I know this medicine." "You do?" "It's prepared only for children suffering from silver lung fever." Ethan's voice became tense. "Can it be cured?" She hesitated. "If treatment continues consistently." "Yes." "But if the medicine runs out?" She never finished the sentence. She didn't need to. Ethan already understood. How much would a full recovery cost? Amelia quietly named the amount. It was less than the crown spent decorating the Great Hall for one royal banquet. Ethan stared at the prescription in disbelief. One celebration. That was all it would take to save Lily's life. He looked at Amelia. "Prepare everything she needs." The healer blinked. "You mean medicine, food, regular examinations, whatever the child requires?" Amelia smiled with relief. "I'll have everything ready by tonight." Ethan raised one hand. "But Hannah must never know it came from me." She looked confused. "Why?" "Because if she believes she owes the king, she'll refuse." Amelia slowly nodded. "Then how should I explain it?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Tell her an anonymous benefactor settled the debt. No names, no titles, only kindness." As Amelia hurried away to prepare the medicine, Ethan walked alone through the castle gardens. Children from nearby villages laughed as they chased butterflies beyond the stone walls. He imagined Lily among them. Healthy, running, smiling without coughing. The image lingered in his heart. Behind a blooming rose hedge, Marcus Hale quietly observed the conversation Ethan had just finished with Amelia. His expression darkened. "So," he murmured to himself, "the king has become interested in the maid." Marcus slowly turned away. A calculating smile appeared across his face. "If Hannah Brooks is important to Ethan, then perhaps she can become useful to me." Far across the kingdom, Hannah finished another exhausting shift and quietly folded her apron. Just as she reached for her familiar wicker basket, the elderly cook stopped her. "You've received a letter." Hannah looked surprised. "No one writes to me." Neither of them noticed the royal seal hidden beneath the plain brown wrapping, or realized that one unopened envelope was about to change every life connected to Blackstone Castle forever. The most life-changing gifts rarely arrive wrapped in gold. Sometimes they come inside an ordinary envelope with no name attached. Hannah looked down at the plain brown envelope resting in her hands. There was no return address, only 3 handwritten words. For Hannah Brooks. The elderly cook smiled. It was delivered by one of the castle messengers. I've never seen handwriting like that. Hannah thanked him before slipping the envelope carefully into her basket. She assumed it was another unpaid bill, or perhaps a notice from the village apothecary demanding money she simply didn't have. She didn't dare open it until she reached home. As always, she hurried through the western gate before sunset. Behind an upstairs window overlooking the courtyard, Ethan quietly watched her leave. He had spent the entire afternoon wondering whether he had done the right thing. Would she accept anonymous help? Or would her pride convince her to refuse it? He honestly didn't know. At the cottage, Lily ran into her mother's arms with the same joyful smile that erased every ounce of Hannah's exhaustion. You came home. I always will. Mrs. Eleanor stepped outside carrying fresh laundry. The healer visited. Hannah froze. The royal healer? The older woman nodded. She examined Lily. She brought enough medicine for several months. Hannah's face turned pale. What? She said someone settled every debt. No, Hannah whispered. That's impossible. Mrs. Eleanor gently pointed toward the basket. Perhaps your answer is inside that envelope. With trembling fingers, Hannah finally broke the wax seal. Inside was a single sheet of parchment. The writing was elegant. Simple. Your daughter's treatment has been fully arranged. Her medicines will continue without interruption. You owe nothing. Please accept this without searching for the person responsible. Sometimes kindness asks only to remain unseen. There was no signature, no royal crest, nothing identifying the sender. Several smaller papers slipped onto the table. Paid invoices, medical receipts, appointments already scheduled, every outstanding debt, marked in full. Hannah stared silently at the documents. She checked each page once, then again. Finally, she covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. This can't be real. Lily looked up innocently. Mom. Hannah suddenly knelt and hugged her daughter as tightly as she could. We're going to be all right. You hear me? We're going to be all right. The little girl laughed, not fully understanding why her mother was crying and smiling at the same time. Outside, Mrs. Eleanor quietly wiped away tears of her own. For the first time in years, hope had entered the little cottage. The following morning, Hannah visited the royal infirmary before reporting for work. Amelia Carter greeted her warmly. You must be Hannah. You know my name? I've been expecting you. Confused, Hannah handed over the letter. I came because... The medicine. I don't understand. Amelia smiled gently. You don't need to understand. You only need to bring Lily every week. We'll take care of the rest. But who paid? I'm afraid I promised not to tell. Hannah lowered her eyes. Then, can you at least thank them for me? Amelia's smile softened. I believe they already know exactly what kind of woman you are. As Hannah left the infirmary carrying fresh medicine, she failed to notice Marcus Hale standing beneath one of the stone archways. He had watched the entire conversation. Anonymous payments, private meetings, royal involvement. His suspicions immediately deepened. No servant receives this much attention without a reason. A dangerous idea slowly formed inside his mind. If he could discover why the king cared so deeply about Hannah Brooks, perhaps he could use that secret against the throne itself. Far above, Ethan stood alone on the castle balcony. He watched Hannah walk across the courtyard. Her steps seemed lighter. The lines of constant worry had softened, if only a little. For the first time since he had followed her into the forest, he saw genuine relief in her smile. He quietly exhaled, not because she knew who had helped her. She didn't. But because one little girl would no longer count medicine drops before bedtime, and one devoted mother could finally breathe without wondering whether tomorrow would be the day she lost everything. Neither Ethan nor Hannah realized that the anonymous kindness meant to protect them had already attracted the attention of the one man willing to turn compassion into a weapon. The real danger had not ended. It had only just begun. The people who fear the truth the most are often the first to notice when hope begins to grow. For nearly a week, life inside the small cottage began to change. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the quiet ways that mattered most. Lily's fever came less often. Her coughing no longer echoed through the night. Each visit to the royal infirmary ended with another bottle of medicine, Another encouraging smile from Amelia Carter, and another reminder that every expense had already been arranged. Little by little, color returned to the child's cheeks. For the first time in months, she laughed while chasing butterflies outside the cottage instead of watching them from her bed. Every evening, Hannah thanked God for the mysterious stranger she would probably never meet. She still had no idea that the Alpha King himself had become the guardian standing silently behind her family. Back at Blackstone Castle, Ethan noticed the change immediately. From the balcony overlooking the courtyard, he watched Hannah carrying laundry across the gardens. She still worked as hard as every other servant. She still spoke softly, still bowed respectfully. But something had changed. The constant weight in her eyes had begun to lift. Hope had returned. Ethan found himself smiling without realizing it. Rowan quietly approached beside him. "She's different." Ethan nodded. "So is her daughter." "You've seen them again?" "No." "I asked Amelia." The old general folded his arms. "Lily is recovering faster than expected. She may live a completely normal life." For several moments, neither man spoke. Finally, Rowan looked toward Ethan. "You've done more for that child than anyone else." Ethan slowly shook his head. "I only removed the burden. Hannah is the one saving her every single day." Meanwhile, Marcus Hale had reached a very different conclusion. From hidden conversations, stolen records, and servants who talked too freely, he had learned one dangerous fact. Someone inside the royal court was secretly protecting Hannah Brooks. He simply hadn't discovered who. Standing inside his private office, Marcus spread several papers across his desk. Medical invoices, messenger records, schedules from the royal infirmary. Nothing directly connected the payments to Ethan. Whoever arranged everything had been remarkably careful. Marcus smiled coldly. "If I can't find the benefactor, I'll force them to reveal themselves." The opportunity arrived sooner than expected. Several days later, Hannah was carrying clean linens through the eastern corridor when another maid accidentally dropped an expensive silver serving tray. The tray struck the marble floor with a deafening crash. Every servant froze. The house steward stormed into the hallway. "What happened?" The frightened young maid burst into tears. "I'm sorry. It slipped." Before anyone could speak again, Marcus appeared. His eyes immediately settled on Hannah. "Who is supervising this corridor?" Hannah answered honestly. "I was nearby, sir." Marcus slowly nodded. "Then you're responsible." The young maid looked horrified. "No, it was my mistake." Marcus silenced her with one sharp glance. "I wasn't asking." Hannah understood exactly what he was doing. He wanted a reason. Any reason. She calmly stepped forward. "If punishment is necessary, I'll accept it." Marcus almost smiled. "So noble." "Very well. You'll lose 1 month's wages." Several servants gasped quietly. 1 month's wages. Nearly everything Hannah had left after paying for food. She lowered her head. "Yes, sir." Marcus walked away satisfied. But he failed to notice someone watching from the opposite balcony. Ethan had witnessed the entire exchange. Every word, every expression. After Marcus disappeared around the corner, Ethan turned toward Rowan. "Did you see what happened?" "I did. The tray wasn't Hannah's responsibility." "I know." Ethan's voice grew calm. Too calm. The steward followed Marcus's order. "He did." Rowan hesitated. "Will you intervene?" Ethan remained silent. His eyes followed Hannah as she quietly comforted the crying young maid instead of defending herself. She wasn't angry. She wasn't blaming anyone. She simply placed a reassuring hand on the frightened servant's shoulder. "It's all right. It was an accident." Those simple words settled something deep inside Ethan's heart. Marcus believed he had found Hannah's weakness. He was wrong. Her kindness was her greatest strength. And for the first time since ascending the throne, Ethan realized remaining an invisible protector would no longer be enough. If Marcus had begun targeting Hannah once, he would do it again. The time was approaching when the Alpha King would have to step out of the shadows and protect the woman who had never once asked him for anything. The strongest people are often those who never realize someone powerful has already chosen to stand beside them. The deduction from Hannah's wages spread through the servants' quarters before sunset. Some whispered that she had been careless. Others insisted the punishment was unfair. Hannah ignored every rumor. She folded fresh linens, polished silverware, and completed every task exactly as she always had. When another maid quietly apologized for what had happened, Hannah simply smiled. "It wasn't your fault. If someone had to bear the blame, I'm glad it was me." The young servant stared at her in disbelief. But you'll lose almost everything. Hannah glanced toward the western horizon where the sun slowly descended behind the forest. I've survived worse. What she didn't say was even simpler. Lily was alive. Nothing else mattered. From the upper gallery, Ethan had watched the entire conversation. The quiet dignity in Hannah's voice unsettled him more than anger ever could. She wasn't defending herself. She wasn't demanding justice. She was protecting someone weaker than herself. Again, that evening Ethan summoned Rowan. The wage deduction. It ends. Rowan nodded. I've already confirmed Marcus ordered it. Without authority, Ethan walked toward the large window overlooking the courtyard. If I overturn the punishment publicly, Marcus will know Hannah matters to me, and he'll target her even more. Rowan understood immediately. So we solved the problem another way. Ethan smiled slightly. Exactly. The next morning, the castle steward received an unexpected royal decree. Beginning immediately, every servant assigned additional responsibilities during the harvest festival would receive a special royal bonus. The amount matched almost exactly what Hannah had lost. Every servant celebrated the unexpected reward. No one questioned why it had been announced so suddenly. No one except Marcus. He stared at the decree with narrowed eyes. What convenient timing. His suspicion deepened. Someone was protecting Hannah with remarkable precision. Meanwhile, Hannah accepted the bonus with quiet gratitude. She honestly believed the kingdom had simply enjoyed a prosperous season. That evening she used part of the money to buy fresh fruit for Lily. The little girl laughed with excitement while holding a bright red apple. We haven't had these in forever. Hannah smiled. I know. Eat slowly. You deserve every bite. As mother and daughter shared their simple meal, Ethan once again stood unseen beneath the trees beyond the cottage. He had promised himself he would stop coming. Yet every few days his feet led him back to the same place. Not out of curiosity anymore. Out of concern. He watched Lily run across the small yard chasing fireflies. She no longer coughed after only a few steps. She laughed. A real laugh. Clear. Free. Hannah watched her daughter with tears shining softly in her eyes. Careful. Don't run too fast. I'm strong now. Lily called back happily. Ethan smiled. For a brief moment, the burdens of ruling an entire kingdom disappeared. Then another voice interrupted the peace. Beautiful family. Ethan instantly stepped deeper into the shadows. Marcus Hale emerged from the path leading toward the cottage. Hannah looked genuinely surprised. Lord Marcus? I didn't expect. I was passing through. His smile remained polite. Calculated. I've heard your daughter has recovered remarkably. Hannah instinctively stepped closer to Lily. Yes. We've been blessed. Marcus's eyes wandered around the modest cottage. So I've heard. Anonymous generosity. What a fascinating miracle. Hannah's expression changed almost imperceptibly. I don't understand. I'm simply curious. Marcus continued pleasantly. Has your mysterious benefactor revealed themselves yet? No. And if they never do, I'll still pray for them every day. Marcus studied her face carefully. Searching. Testing. Finding nothing. Everything she said was sincere. As he finally turned to leave, his smile faded the moment his back faced the cottage. If she truly doesn't know, then someone else is hiding the truth. Hidden among the trees, Ethan understood something equally important. Marcus was no longer guessing. He had started investigating, and sooner or later, his search would lead dangerously close to the king himself. For the first time since secretly following Hannah home, Ethan realized protecting her from poverty had been easy. Protecting her from a man consumed by ambition would require something far more dangerous. Soon, the truth neither of them intended to reveal would begin forcing its way into the light. A secret can protect a heart for a season, but eventually the truth begins knocking louder than fear. The days that followed passed with an uneasy calm. Hannah continued her work as though nothing had changed. She greeted every servant with the same gentle smile. She thanked Amelia after each visit to the royal infirmary. She returned home every evening carrying fresh medicine for Lily and quiet gratitude for the stranger who had transformed their lives. But elsewhere, Marcus Hale had stopped relying on coincidence. He wanted answers, and answers required traps. One rainy afternoon, he summoned the castle steward. I have a simple assignment. The steward bowed. What are your orders, my lord? Marcus placed a sealed leather pouch onto the desk. Deliver this to Hannah Brooks. But tell no one. The steward looked confused. What should I tell her? Marcus smiled. Only that it comes from the person who has been helping her. The steward hesitated. There isn't a name. There doesn't need to be. Marcus's eyes narrowed. If Hannah knows her mysterious benefactor, her reaction will reveal everything. Late that afternoon, Hannah finished polishing the dining hall when the steward approached. This was left for you. She looked at the unfamiliar pouch. For me. He said it came from the one who has been helping your family. For several seconds, Hannah simply stared. Then she slowly shook her head. There must be some mistake. No mistake. He insisted. Hannah accepted the pouch politely, but made no attempt to open it. Instead, she walked directly toward the royal infirmary. Marcus watched from a distant balcony. Interesting. Inside the infirmary, Amelia looked surprised. Hannah. She placed the unopened pouch on the healer's desk. Someone said this came from the person who paid Lily's debts. I've never received anything before. I thought, if it's truly from them, perhaps it belongs with the medical records. Amelia immediately understood. The pouch hadn't come from Ethan. Someone else had sent it. She carefully untied the leather cord. Inside were only a handful of silver coins and a folded note. The message contained a single sentence. If you wish to thank your benefactor, come alone to the old chapel tonight. Amelia's expression changed instantly. This isn't right. Hannah looked confused. Why? Because whoever has helped you has never once asked for anything in return. She looked directly into Hannah's eyes. I don't believe this message came from the same person. A quiet chill passed through the room. For the first time, Hannah felt something she hadn't experienced since Lily became ill. Fear. That evening, Amelia requested an urgent audience with Ethan. When she finished explaining everything, Ethan's face hardened. He invited her to the chapel? Yes. And she refused. Amelia nodded. She said if the anonymous benefactor truly wished to meet, they would never ask her to walk into the night alone. A faint smile touched Ethan's face. She trusted her instincts. Then the smile disappeared. Marcus is testing her. Rowan folded his arms. He knows she's connected to someone. He simply doesn't know who. Ethan turned toward the window overlooking the dark castle grounds. He'll become more reckless. And if Hannah keeps refusing his traps, he'll create one she can't avoid. Meanwhile, unaware that 3 people inside the castle were now protecting her from different directions, Hannah tucked Lily into bed. Mom. Yes. The little girl looked up sleepily. Do you think kind people ever get tired? Hannah brushed a strand of blonde hair from her daughter's forehead. I'm sure they do. Then why do they keep helping others? Hannah smiled softly. Because someone once helped them. Lily closed her eyes. I hope we can help people like that someday. You already have. Hannah whispered. You remind me every day why kindness matters. Outside the cottage, hidden beneath the cover of darkness, Ethan listened in silence. Those simple words reached him more deeply than any praise offered inside the royal court. At that same moment, across the kingdom, Marcus quietly burned the failed note in his fireplace. His trap had revealed only one thing. Hannah Brooks could not be manipulated by greed. If he wanted to uncover the king's secret, he would have to threaten the one person Hannah loved more than her own life. And that realization marked the beginning of the most dangerous game either of them had ever faced. The moment evil stops chasing your secrets is usually the moment it starts chasing the people you love. The rain had barely stopped when Hannah finished another long day inside Blackstone Castle. For the first time in weeks, she felt something close to peace. Lily was smiling again. Her fever had almost disappeared. The medicine bottles no longer emptied faster than hope could replace them. She held a small paper bag filled with fresh pears she had purchased on her way home. Lily loved pears. Tonight, they would celebrate nothing more than another ordinary evening together. She treasured ordinary evenings. She never reached the cottage. Halfway along the forest path, Hannah noticed something unusual. Silence. No birds. No crickets. Even the wind seemed to have stopped breathing. Her footsteps slowed. Instinct whispered that something was wrong. Then she saw it. One of Lily's tiny knitted scarves lay in the middle of the trail, covered in mud. Hannah froze. She had left that scarf hanging beside the cottage door that morning. Her heartbeat exploded. Lily, without another thought, she dropped the basket and ran. Branches tore across her sleeves. Leaves slapped against her face. She ignored all of it. The cottage appeared through the trees. Its front door stood wide open. One window had been shattered. The flower boxes beneath the windows lay overturned across the ground. Mrs. Eleanor. No answer. Lily. Only silence. Hannah rushed inside. The room was empty. The blanket lay on the floor. One wooden chair had been knocked over. Mrs. Eleanor's knitting basket rested near the fireplace, abandoned. Lily. Her voice cracked. Nothing. A tiny wooden wolf carving lay beneath the table. Lily never let it leave her pocket. Hannah dropped to her knees and picked it up with trembling hands. No. Tears blurred her vision. No. Behind the cottage, a frightened voice suddenly echoed through the forest. Mom. Lily. Hannah ran toward the sound. Beyond the trees, she saw two masked men dragging Lily toward waiting horses, while Mrs. Eleanor struggled helplessly against another attacker. Let her go. Hannah threw herself forward without hesitation. One kidnapper shoved her violently aside. She hit the ground hard, but immediately climbed back to her feet. Another man grabbed Lily. The little girl cried desperately. Mom. Hannah seized a fallen tree branch and struck one attacker across the shoulder. He staggered backward. For one hopeful second, she believed she might reach her daughter. Then steel flashed. A sword blocked her path. The leader slowly removed his hood. Marcus Hale. Hannah stared at him in disbelief. My lord. Marcus smiled without warmth. I warned myself not to underestimate you. I wasn't wrong. What do you want? You. No. Marcus looked toward the terrified child. I want the truth. You've become far too valuable to someone inside Blackstone Castle. I simply intend to discover why. I don't know what you're talking about. I believe you. He stepped closer. But I also know one thing. He glanced toward Lily. Every mother eventually speaks when her child is threatened. Before Hannah could move again, a deep voice thundered across the clearing. Take one more step, and none of you leave this forest alive. Every head turned. Standing between the towering pines was Ethan Blackwood. No disguise. No hunter's cloak. He wore the black royal armor of the Alpha King. Moonlight reflected across the silver wolf crest upon his chest. Behind him stood Rowan and 6 elite royal guards. Marcus's confident smile disappeared instantly. Your Majesty. Ethan never looked at him. His eyes remained fixed on Hannah and the frightened little girl. He slowly drew his sword. Its polished blade caught the pale moonlight. You planned this from the beginning. Marcus forced himself to remain calm. I was protecting the kingdom. You were hunting an innocent child. Ethan answered coldly. There is no kingdom worth protecting if monsters are allowed to wear noble titles. Marcus suddenly seized Lily and placed a dagger against the rope binding her wrists. No one moves. The clearing fell silent. Hannah's breathing became uneven. Ethan's grip tightened around his sword. One wrong decision, one careless movement, could destroy the very family he had quietly protected from the shadows. For the first time since secretly following Hannah home, the Alpha King realized this was no longer about anonymous kindness. This was about choosing whether he would finally reveal himself, or risk losing the two people who had already changed his heart forever. A true king is not revealed by the crown he wears, but by the person he chooses to protect when everyone else tells him to walk away. The clearing stood frozen beneath the silver light of the moon. Marcus tightened his grip on Lily's arm. The frightened little girl trembled but refused to cry. She remembered what her mother had always taught her. When you're afraid, keep looking for the good people. Her tear-filled eyes found Ethan. She did not know he was the Alpha King. She only saw the man whose voice had frightened away every nightmare for a single heartbeat. Marcus laughed softly. So this is what it took. The mighty Alpha King leaving his castle for a servant. Ethan's expression never changed. Release the child and surrender. Marcus slowly shook his head. You've hidden your interest in Hannah well, but not well enough. He looked toward Hannah. You truly had no idea. Confusion filled Hannah's face. What is he talking about? Marcus smiled cruelly. The anonymous benefactor. The medicine. The debts. The food. It was never some mysterious stranger. His eyes shifted toward Ethan. It was your king. Hannah's entire world seemed to stop. She looked at Ethan, then back at Marcus, then at the little girl still trapped between armed men. No, she whispered. It can't be. Ethan finally spoke. It can. His calm voice carried across the clearing. I followed you that first night. I saw Lily. I saw what you sacrificed every day. I couldn't pretend I hadn't. Tears filled Hannah's eyes. You knew? For weeks. Why didn't you tell me? Because kindness shouldn't become a debt. I wanted Lily to live. Nothing more. For a long moment Hannah could not answer. Every unexplained blessing, every bottle of medicine, every paid invoice, every miracle, they all suddenly had the same face. Marcus interrupted with a harsh laugh. Touching, but unfortunately, he pulled Lily closer. This story doesn't end happily. Before anyone could react, Marcus shoved the child toward one of his men and drew his sword. Kill the king. Steel exploded through the quiet forest. The attackers charged. Ethan met the first strike head-on. Their swords collided with a sharp crack that echoed beneath the trees. Rowan and the royal guards rushed forward, intercepting the remaining attackers. Chaos erupted across the clearing. Hannah saw one masked man lifting Lily onto a horse. Without thinking, she ran. Lily, the rider kicked his horse forward. She would never catch him. Then Ethan saw it. Horse, he shouted. One royal guard immediately threw him the reins of a nearby mount. Ethan vaulted into the saddle in one fluid motion. He raced after the fleeing rider through the narrow forest trail. Branches whipped across his armor. The horse thundered between ancient pines. Ahead, the kidnapper glanced backward. Too late. Ethan urged his horse alongside him. With one powerful swing of his sword, he struck the man's weapon from his hand. The blade disappeared into the darkness. The attacker lost his balance. He tumbled from the saddle and rolled across the forest floor. Ethan immediately caught Lily before she could fall. The frightened child buried her face against his shoulder. I'm scared. I know. You don't have to be anymore. He gently turned his horse back toward the clearing. Meanwhile, Marcus found himself surrounded. Every one of his hired men had been disarmed. Rowan stood directly behind him. Royal guards blocked every escape. Marcus slowly lowered his sword. You've won. Ethan dismounted while carrying Lily safely in his arms. He walked straight toward Hannah. Without a word, he carefully placed the little girl into her mother's embrace. Hannah held Lily so tightly that neither of them could stop crying. I'm here. I'm here. You've got me. Lily nodded against her mother's shoulder. I knew you'd come. Hannah looked up at Ethan through tears. So did he. For the first time, their eyes met without secrets standing between them. No king. No servant. Only two people united by the same desperate wish. To keep one little girl alive. Watching from several steps away, Rowan quietly realized something extraordinary. Ethan had not entered the forest that night to rescue a kingdom. He had entered it to save one family. And in doing so, he had begun becoming the kind of king history would never forget. Sometimes justice begins with a sword, but it is completed with the truth spoken before everyone. The ride back to Blackstone Castle took place beneath a sky slowly brightening with dawn. Marcus Hale rode between two royal guards with iron shackles around his wrists. His noble title no longer protected him. His silence no longer concealed his crimes. Behind them, Hannah held Lily tightly inside a covered carriage while Mrs. Eleanor sat beside them. The little girl had finally fallen asleep, exhausted after the terrifying night. Hannah gently brushed the hair away from Lily's face. Every few moments, she looked through the carriage window toward the rider leading the procession. Ethan never turned around. He remained focused on the road ahead. Yet somehow she knew. He was making certain no danger could reach them again. When the castle gates opened, word spread through the fortress with astonishing speed. The Alpha King had returned. Lord Marcus had been arrested. An emergency royal council had been summoned. By midday, nobles, commanders, advisors, and senior servants filled the great hall. No one understood the full story. Rumors raced from one corner of the room to another. Marcus stood before the throne surrounded by guards. Even now he carried himself with pride. You have no proof, he declared confidently. I investigated suspicious activity. I protected the crown. Ethan slowly rose from the throne. His voice remained calm. You abducted an innocent child. You assaulted loyal citizens. You conspired against your king. Marcus smiled coldly. Can anyone here prove it? Without speaking, Ethan nodded toward the entrance. The massive doors opened. Rowan entered first. Behind him came Mrs. Eleanor. Then Hannah. Finally, Lily quietly walked beside her mother while holding the small wooden wolf in both hands. The entire hall fell silent. Marcus's confidence wavered for the first time. Rowan stepped forward. We recovered written orders bearing Lord Marcus's personal seal. He placed several documents before the council. We captured surviving mercenaries. They have confessed. We recovered payment records. The evidence is complete. One by one, the council members examined the documents. Faces hardened. Whispers disappeared. Marcus looked around the chamber, searching desperately for support. No one met his eyes. Ethan descended the steps leading from the throne. He stopped only a few feet away. You believed kindness was weakness. You believed compassion could be exploited. You were wrong. Marcus lowered his head. For the first time, he had no answer. The royal chancellor stood. By unanimous judgment, Lord Marcus Hale is stripped of all noble rank, lands, and privileges. He shall spend the remainder of his life imprisoned for treason, attempted murder, and the kidnapping of a child. The guards immediately escorted him away. Marcus glanced back one final time. Not at Ethan. At Hannah. He finally understood why he had lost. He had underestimated the quiet strength of a woman who never stopped protecting others. As the great doors closed behind the disgraced noble, an unfamiliar silence settled across the hall. Then Ethan did something no one expected. He turned toward Hannah. Before every noble in the kingdom, before every servant who had once ignored her, before every royal advisor, the Alpha King bowed his head, only slightly, but enough for every witness to gasp. Hannah Brooks. His voice echoed through the chamber. For months, you accepted suffering without bitterness. You protected others even when no one protected you. You never asked who saved your daughter. You only prayed that they would be blessed. Emotion filled Hannah's eyes. You owe me nothing, Your Majesty. Ethan looked directly at her. I disagree. I owe you a reminder. He glanced around the great hall. Power does not create greatness. Character does. He turned back toward Hannah. You reminded your king what that means. Every servant watching from the edges of the hall felt tears welling in their eyes. The woman they had worked beside, the quiet maid few had ever noticed, was now standing at the center of the kingdom with the respect of its king. And although neither Ethan nor Hannah spoke another word, everyone present could already sense that the story between them had not reached its end. It had only now become impossible for either of them to hide what destiny had quietly been writing from the very first night he chose to follow his maid home. Some people believe miracles happen in a single moment. The truth is that the greatest miracles are built from hundreds of quiet choices no one else ever sees. Several days passed after Marcus Hale's conviction. For the first time in many months, Blackstone Castle felt different. The servants laughed more freely. The guards stood a little taller. Even the corridors seemed lighter, as though the walls themselves had finally released a long-held breath. Hannah noticed the change immediately. Fear no longer followed her footsteps. No whispers stopped when she entered a room. Instead, servants smiled warmly. Some even thanked her. It embarrassed her every time. She had never wanted recognition. She had only wanted Lily to survive. Early one morning, Hannah arrived at the castle gardens carrying a basket of freshly cut herbs for the royal kitchens. The morning dew still rested upon every flower. She paused for a moment to admire the sunrise. You finally smiled. The familiar voice made her turn. Ethan stood several steps away without royal guards or ceremonial robes. Today he wore only a simple dark coat. For the first time since revealing himself, he looked less like a king, and more like the man she had first unknowingly trusted. Hannah lowered her eyes respectfully. Your Majesty. He smiled gently. I've asked you before. When we're alone, you may call me Ethan. She hesitated. I don't think I could. You already have. A faint blush colored her cheeks as she remembered the terrifying night in the forest. She had shouted his name without thinking. Neither of them mentioned it. Instead, Ethan looked toward the flowers. I've been told Lily is feeling much stronger. She is. Hannah's smile returned instantly. She runs through the house again. Mrs. Eleanor says she laughs too loudly. I think that's the sweetest sound I've ever heard. Ethan listened quietly. Then he reached into his coat and removed a small carved wooden wolf. It matched the tiny carving Lily always carried. I had another one made. I thought, if she ever loses hers, she won't have to worry. Hannah accepted it carefully. Her fingers brushed his for the briefest moment. Neither spoke. Neither moved away immediately. Finally, Hannah looked at him. You never expected anything in return. No. You risked your reputation. Yes. You followed a servant home. I did. She shook her head in quiet disbelief. Why? Ethan looked toward the rising sun. When I first became king, I believed strength meant solving the kingdom's biggest problems. He smiled softly. Then one evening, I followed someone carrying medicine through the rain. I discovered that saving one child could matter just as much. Hannah felt tears gathering again. Not from sadness, from relief. The burden of wondering why had finally disappeared. You changed our lives, she whispered. Ethan slowly shook his head. No, you reminded me why I became king. Footsteps interrupted the quiet conversation. Lily came running across the garden with Mrs. Eleanor close behind. The little girl laughed as she reached them. She stopped in front of Ethan without fear. I made something. She proudly held out a folded piece of parchment. He unfolded it carefully. It was a child's drawing. 3 people stood beneath an enormous tree. One very tall man, one smiling woman, one little girl holding both of their hands. Above them, Lily had written in uneven letters, "My heroes." Ethan stared at the drawing for several silent moments. Then he slowly knelt until he was at Lily's eye level. "May I keep this?" She nodded enthusiastically. "It's for you. You saved my mom too." Those simple words reached deeper than any victory Ethan had ever earned on a battlefield. Around them, several gardeners quietly pretended not to watch. Yet every one of them smiled. Not because they were witnessing a romance, but because they were witnessing something even rarer. A king who had learned that compassion strengthened authority instead of weakening it. A mother who had never allowed hardship to destroy her kindness. And a little girl whose grateful heart had quietly united 2 lives that neither destiny nor royalty had ever planned to bring together. For the first time since the night Ethan secretly followed his maid home, neither of them was hiding from the future anymore. They were finally walking toward it together, one honest step at a time. The greatest love stories are not remembered because a king found his queen. They are remembered because 2 ordinary hearts taught an entire kingdom what love truly looks like. A full year passed. Spring returned to Blackstone Castle. The gardens bloomed brighter than ever before, and the kingdom flourished under Ethan Blackwood's rule. Travelers often spoke of the Alpha King, who listened before judging. Farmers told stories of a ruler who visited villages without announcing his arrival. Servants whispered that the king never allowed another worker to be treated with disrespect inside his castle. Most people believed those changes came from wisdom. Only a few knew they had begun with a quiet maid carrying medicine home through the rain. Life had changed for Hannah as well. She no longer worked endless hours simply to survive. Instead, Ethan appointed her to oversee the castle's charitable kitchens and healing stores, ensuring that no child in the kingdom would ever be denied food or medicine because of poverty. It was work she accepted with gratitude, not because it brought honor, because she understood hunger. She understood fear, and she never wanted another mother to feel as helpless as she once had. Lily had grown stronger with every passing season. Her laughter echoed through the castle halls so often that even the royal guards smiled whenever they heard her running through the corridors. She still carried the tiny wooden wolf in one pocket. The second carving Ethan had given her rested safely beside her bed. She called them her brave wolves. One warm afternoon, the great courtyard filled with nobles, villagers, merchants, servants, and soldiers. A royal ceremony had been announced. No one knew its purpose. Ethan stepped onto the stone platform before the gathered crowd. Beside him stood Rowan. Nearby waited Hannah and Lily, both wearing simple but elegant medieval clothing. Neither expected to be called forward. The murmuring crowd slowly fell silent. Ethan's voice carried clearly across the courtyard. A kingdom is not measured by the strength of its walls. It is measured by how it treats those with the least power. His gaze found Hannah. A year ago, most people saw only a maid. I saw a mother willing to sacrifice everything for her child. He extended his hand toward her. Hannah Brooks. She hesitated before walking forward. Every pair of eyes followed her. Some remembered serving beside her in the kitchens. Others remembered passing her without learning her name. Ethan continued. You never sought wealth. You never sought status. You never asked for reward. You simply chose kindness when life gave you every reason to become bitter. He paused. And because of that, you changed your king. Silence filled the courtyard. Even the wind seemed to stop. Ethan turned toward the assembled kingdom. From this day forward, the House of Hope shall stand under royal protection. It will provide food, medicine, and shelter to every family in need. Hannah Brooks shall lead it. Thunderous applause erupted. Servants cried openly. Villagers cheered. Several mothers embraced their children. Hannah covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. She had once believed the world had forgotten her. Now she stood before thousands, not because she had noble blood, but because she had chosen compassion. Lily suddenly tugged Ethan's sleeve. When I grow up, I want to help people too. Ethan smiled warmly. I have no doubt you will. The little girl reached for Hannah's hand with one hand and Ethan's with the other. Without thinking, both adults accepted. For a quiet moment, the three of them stood together beneath the spring sunlight. No crown could have made Ethan prouder. No title could have made Hannah happier. And no treasure could have replaced the peace Lily finally carried in her heart. Years later, the kingdom would remember many victories won by the Alpha King. But the story parents told their children before bedtime was always different. They spoke of the night a king secretly followed his maid home, expecting to uncover a mystery. Instead, he discovered courage, unconditional love, and the family that forever transformed both his reign and his heart. Because sometimes destiny does not arrive wearing a crown. Sometimes, it walks home in the rain carrying medicine for someone it loves.